Good afternoon to those in Europe, maybe good evening to those in Asia, and if anyone's listening from the US, good morning to you guys. Welcome to another edition of the WealthTech Talks from the Wealth Mosaic. My name is Stephen Wall. I'm one of the co-founders and head of marketplace and content at the Wealth Mosaic. So today we're going to be talking about what is, I think, a really interesting topic for the industry and really crosses over between the business and the technology side of the market. We're looking at the future technology infrastructure of the wealth management sector. And I'm joined by two guests who I will be speaking to, interviewing today, and who will give us a really interesting perspective on that balance between tech and business and hopefully mixing the two. Matteo De Marchi, Head of Product and Innovation at Finantix. Hi, Matteo. Thank you for joining.
Hello, everybody.
And Ian Woodhouse, Head of Strategy and Change at Orbium, now owned by Accenture. Hi, Ian.
Hi, welcome.
So thank you to you both. Before we get into the topic and sort of your introductions to the topic, can you give us an introduction to yourself? So if we start with you, Matteo, can you tell us who you are, what you do?
Yeah, I'm the head of innovation in Finantix. Finantix is a company that, software company that, offer application for wealth management and financial institution in general. And I'm based in Venice, and my background is a more technical background. I'm working in a wealth management domain since a long time. So in the meantime, I acquired also a lot of experience on that domain. So it's a pleasure for me to be here and discuss on this topic, because I guess that the link between business and technical is the key point for getting a success digital innovation initiative in this world.
Great, thank you, Matteo. And Ian, for you, please.
So I'm with Orbium. So Orbium is a wealth management business and technology implementation firm. It's the largest premium implementation partner of the Avaloq core banking system. We were acquired about 1.5 years ago by Accenture. So now I'm working in the Accenture global wealth practice and across a broader range of business consulting and software. So at the intersection of business and technology, which is quite an exciting place to be. I cover both the existing technologies and the new technologies, and part of my remit is finding great ideas from around the world in the Accenture network that can inform build out of these future models.
Perfect. Well, both, thank you. So for the audience, I'll be interviewing, excuse me, Ian and Matteo for the next sort of 45-50 minutes. If there are questions, please feel free to type them in. We'll try and respond at the end. If we don't have time, if we run through, feel free, I'll sort of assemble the questions and we can try and connect them to the panelists as we go. So the idea about today is really to look at where the industry is now with its technological infrastructure, where it might be going, and some of the future initiatives. So between Ian and Matteo, we should get a nice mix of business and technical view of what the opportunities are, challenges, some of the use cases, some of the tech and tools that exist that can move the market forward based on its requirements. And yeah, it should be a good discussion. So I think what we agreed is Ian has just published a C-level survey from Orbium, which talked to many wealth managers around the world, and he'll just give us a quick introduction, 2 to 3 minutes. I've got my clock watch in, so no, just kidding, but 2 to 3 minutes just to summarize some of the trends as they maybe relate to what Matteo can touch on in terms of technological toolkits and trends. So Ian, over to you for.
Well, I think the first thing is the good news is the wealth management sector remains one of the most attractive in financial services. Participants expect growth to continue. Obviously, the growth in the longer term is will depend on how we come out of COVID. So really the findings are there are some challenges and there are also some opportunities. If I just give you a couple of examples, the challenges are around retention of wealth and intergenerational transfer. Some participants losing up to 1/3 of their assets, or they believe 1/3 of their assets are at risk in transfer to the next generation, which needs to be addressed. The second challenge is the high cost income ratios that most of the participants still experiencing. I think on the flip side, they see the evolution towards a future model. So it's about differentiated client experience. It's the first area. I think intelligent operations and technology is the second. And then some interesting things in terms of responsible leadership and strategy, which we can maybe discuss as we go through. And then lastly, the need to empower, reskill talent, and also help them change to meet the new dynamics. So that very quickly is a summary of the survey. You can download it from the Orbium website. So that's orbium.com. There's a survey section, and you can download it from there.
Great, thank you, Ian. A nice framework for the discussion. So, Matteo, thinking of those areas of challenge, maybe opportunity, but trends, drivers in the industry, what would be your sort of headline introduction to some of the things that you guys are thinking about at Finantics from a perspective of what technology can do for the market, or what technology exists and that you're working on?
Yeah, I fully agree in that the fact that right now this is a very let's say important moment on change. There's a lot of things that is changing in the world, but also in the wealth management and in private banking world mainly. Finantics is a company that implements software as a sort of front-end oriented company. So we integrate backend core banking system, and our goal is let's say add value on the data that we got from the core banking system, but not just from the core banking system, but from many other data sources, if you want. And on top of that, our goal is try to implement an efficient system that allows the RM, the advisor, to work in an efficient way and to communicate and cooperate with their clients in an efficient way. I would say that as in this period, there's a lot of many different things that is happening. COVID-19, for example, is for sure is the most evident one. But also, for example, as Jans is saying, the changing of the client behavior, or being of the client, because there's the new millennium guys that is coming out and that are starting for getting much more, let's say, money, and they have to manage those money by using probably wealth management company or private banking. And this is another important disrupting, let's say, point that will change the game in the next probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And then for sure, also there's the reducing of the cost. As Jan is saying, the cost is very important for wealth managers, and reducing cost, but not just in matter of reducing the cost for a new digital initiative, but also reducing the cost in a long-term approach to reduce the cost of maintenance of the system. That will be very important for be competitive in the future. So Finantics is let's say is part of this game, having a stronger architecture in terms of modularity. We think that modularity is the key for providing a good architecture, technical architecture behind, let's say, any kind of application, but mainly also in wealth management, because modularity means freedom at the end. Modularity means that you can segregate your application or isolate part of your application and make them decoupled from the others, and allows you, as I said, in long-term maintenance point of view, to switch part of your system without impact so much the other part. I guess that one of the last main change in terms of architectural point of view in the last years is service-oriented architecture. Service-oriented architecture has, right now, changed the game in the last 15 years a lot, because now is much easier to integrate other systems. It's much easier to, let's say, coordinate different systems together. But now there's a new paradigm that is coming out, that is microservices, that is a sort of let's say, a step ahead on the service-oriented architecture. And the main difference is that with the microservice architecture, you can completely decouple part of your application without linking them together. In the service-oriented architecture, the needs was having a sort of generic infrastructure behind the services. You can access to the system in an easy way, but the system, the services have to be implemented in a coherent way across the different domains. Okay. With the microservice architecture, we skip this. So we go ahead, step ahead. And at that point, you can have your solution can be implemented in many different technology. You can switch one part of your application in a very easy way. You can this is another very important part that is, let's say, changing the game right now, is that this a lot of new fintech that is coming out, and so is one of the needs of the financial institution is getting the best from that specific requirement, so for the specific business needs, and for doing it, microservices absolutely is a mandatory on this. And yeah, and this is exactly how we implement our application. Our application is based on that. It's modular and microservice oriented. So, yeah.
Perfect. Great. Well, both. I wanted to touch on, you've introduced it really. Some of the drivers for the change in the technology infrastructure of the industry. So moving it from where it is now to where it needs to be in the future. And those clear two drivers that you've mentioned, Ian and Matteo, would be the next generation of clients, so assets moving from one wealth holder to the next, and the challenges that firms are facing there, which I definitely technology has a role in terms of improving the client experience, so we can touch on that, and also I think on cost income. So can you maybe, Ian, give us a little bit of a view of why technology, or where the firms are in the market now and where they're restricted and why those issues are a challenge to them? So, is it technology that's causing them a challenge in terms of those two areas?
So I think if you look at where the wealth management industry has come from and is perhaps heading towards, I think what you've seen is a period where we've had quite benign stock markets, and so wealth managers have been able to grow, but they've tended to grow inefficiently. They've added additional headcount to speed up. So the first question, or the first issue, is that their growth has been relatively inefficient. Now the markets have changed and we're in a different environment. They'll need to revisit the efficiency of their growth. I think that's the first thing. So it's both a cost issue and also how to grow the business effectively. I think the second big challenge they face is many of them have been distracted, and because a lot of the investment has gone towards mandatory regulatory requirements. The industry has still had a lot of regulation, and that continues to come thick and fast. So that means that they have a limited amount of money left in the budget to invest in some of these new technologies. And the third thing is, we are in this transition that Matteo is very well articulated, where we're going from legacy, fragmented, traditional systems approaches towards these more modular, cloud, workflow-based models. And that transition is a huge opportunity, but only now are we starting to see players moving in that direction. And within wealth, we have seen a few players move in that direction, and the benefits they've achieved have been quite considerable. So you're talking of someone who's moved in that direction would have a cost income benefit of 9%. Yes, so let me repeat that. So a cost income advantage of 9%.
Yep.
So we are seeing some progress. It's early days. It's a journey. Some people are already moving. We think more will start moving towards 2025.
Perfect. Yeah. Matteo, what's your view on the current infrastructure? So Ian's touched on these cost income challenges and legacy technology. Where do you think the industry is in its status now?
My experience said that cloud, let's say, become to be a base word in the wealth management. Let's say, I would say 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, because cloud has a longer story, but in this world, someone tried to talk about the client, start to talk about the cloud in the last 3 or 4 years. In the beginning, cloud was thought as just a way for externalizing the infrastructure, no? But this is not true. Cloud is completely different paradigm. This is the way just for externalizing your system. Yes, could be a benefit because in somehow you have a fixed price, and you have the management of the infrastructure outside your boundary, let's say. But it's just I don't know. It's just very small part of the game. The main important thing is that whenever you are, let's say, moving your infrastructure in the cloud environment, at that point, you have to be ready to be, let's say, compliant with all the features that the clouds can provide to you. And this is very important from the cost point of view, because, for example, having an architecture that is able to scale on demand, on the load of the system, for example, that is able to combine, let's say, or deploy part of your application in different cloud provider. This is another good point for maintain the cost under control and give you the possibility to change your strategy during the investment for the next years, just because it's now it's better to move your infrastructure in another cloud environment instead of the first one that you select at the beginning of the project. So for this reason, I would say that the cloud infrastructure could be very important in order to decrease the cost of the infrastructure and also of the project digital initiatives. But I saw this kind of, let's say, approach and this kind of feeling just in the last, I would say, 1 year or 6 months. So something is changing right now, okay? Mainly in Asia. Asia, I would say that is a little bit more advanced in this way. Asia is pushing a little bit more on this way, and Asia also, from a point of view right now, is understanding a little more what you have to be, what you need to implement, what you need to be complying with for leveraging on the cloud infrastructure. Europe is moving. I would say that in the last 3 or 4 months, I had some discussion with some prospects in Europe that is starting to approach on this. But again, it's the first step from a point of view in a long trip on the next years.
From an existing or legacy infrastructure perspective, what is it that consumes most attention and costs for the wealth managers that you deal with? Them. Ian mentioned core banking systems. I mean, is it there? Where are they spending their money now? Where are they tied down from your perspective?
Again, Finantics is a more a front-end solution. So I would say that the cloud environment is not, this is my experience, personal experience, is not touched so much on the legacy system right now, but is thought to be applied on top of the legacy system. All the systems that are in the middleware system or backend office processes, CRMs, and all those kind of, let's say, part of, let's say, wealth management solution will be impacted in the next couple or 3 years on this new paradigm. I don't have so much experience on legacy system right now. I don't think that there are a lot of initiative in that sense, but maybe Jan knows as different feeling.
Yeah. So Ian, I mean, obviously, we talk about legacy technology in the industry. Maybe it's holding it back. Where do you see the challenge in terms of the existing spend and focus on firms' existing infrastructure? I mean, is it core banking, portfolio management systems? Is it data? Obviously, you mentioned the regulatory aspect.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to look at it is that you need to think about the traditional technology stack in a new way. And this is both from a business perspective and a technology perspective. At the front, the client segmentation, as we mentioned before, becomes much more important. But what you have to do is be able to utilize new technologies to personalize services to help the advisors, to cope with the changing in demand. And the second big area is the channels are multiplying. So it's now about self-service, collaboration, hybrid models. Obviously, we're in a situation where it's more remote interactive. So multiple channels is the second area. And the third area is the front office advisors need intelligent insights and personalization to help meet the demands of the new clients. So that's a change to the front office. And then at the back office, the traditional emphasis has been on investment in the middle and back office, but actually that confers no advantage as opposed to the client segmentation, the channels and the front office. All the advantage around revenue growth is in those front areas. And the back office confers no advantage. So that's becoming much leaner. It's becoming more automated. It's becoming also, what's most important is the books and records, or the data is often in the back. So the emphasis in the back moving forward is more towards the data and management of vast amounts of data to enable the use of new technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then the last piece is these traditional architectures or stacks have been quite highly integrated, as Matteo was kind of saying. Going forward, they'll be more modular, they'll be based around workflows. You'll see much more emphasis on APIs, microservices, at the front, and it will be a significant transition in the way that technology and the stack has been managed. Going forward, it will be more business oriented, aligned with technology, and a greater adoption of newer technologies, which in turn will improve the financial performance and the client satisfaction in the business.
Interesting. So there's a lot going on, and for Fynantics, a lot going on in the front end, which is good. So Ian, does this mean the back end is kind of out in the cloud? I mean, is that where the industry is now? So if it's a sort of data repository, is it already in the cloud, or is it still on premise? And
well, I think there's a transition. So we're moving from the waterfall approach to implementing technology towards more agile. So I think, first of all, the ways in which we implement the technology is changing. And also, as you point out, I think it's progressively moving more towards the cloud. And the reason for that is the cloud is so flexible in terms of allowing on-demand services. So you're shifting fixed cost to variable cost. Now, having said that, the cloud uptake has been pretty strong up in the US market, which is probably the most developed wealth management market. It's also been a little bit stronger in Asia, but in Europe, I mean, there are quite a few issues around data residency, which is holding back the adoption of cloud. So concerns about where the data resides, and also the whole issue of data protection and security is rising on the agenda. So I think this is a temporary blip. So what you'll see is that Europe will overcome these issues, but that's tended to mean that the cloud adoption have been slightly lower in Europe.
But it's happening. Okay.
But it's happening anyway, yeah.
Have you noticed from the research, therefore, that wealth managers in Europe have performed worse because they are behind the curve on cloud, or they're not at the level of the others?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, because generally in the industry there is quite a wide spread of performance between different players. So some people are doing very well in terms of cost income. I think the lowest we had in the participants in the survey was around 40%. Others have a very high cost income up in the 90s or so. There's pretty big spectrum between the more successful players, the average players, and the poor players. And that's also true on the revenue generation side. What you can see is that some people are generating quite high percentage of net new money growth, whereas others are perhaps not growing at all. So there is a divergence in performance. Generally, some of the Far Eastern players are exhibiting slightly better performance, but generally Europe is kind of a mixed position. Some firms doing very well, others doing less well.
So we talk about cloud. Matteo, what other aspects would you point to, perhaps some of the elements you've mentioned already, to improve performance? So it'd be good to get onto the personalization and the analytics on the client engagement side in a minute. But in terms of cost income ratios and improving performance, financial performance, what other factors play in technology?
Yeah, I would add, okay, I would go do a step deep in the technology exactly for explaining some example of what Ian has just said. We as a Fynantics, we have a lot of experience in multi-country projects, no? So there are tier 1 banks, for example, that have a lot of countries to manage, and as a Fynantics, we offer a multi-tenancy solution. So in one single environment, you can manage multiple country, guarantee the data isolation and the configuration, different configuration for each country in the framework itself. One example that I had discussed recently is, for example, the possibility with a cloud with a hybrid cloud solution to let's say, having this kind of decoupling between different functional area, there are, for regulation, the needs to get the data, the sensitive data inside on-premise, for regulation, for example. But there are other kind of data that are not linked, that are not contain sensitive data of the client, but are linked to the client as well. So, for example, an architecture we were designing with a client of us was letting the client sensitive data inside the premise of each country in different environment, or at least in different database, okay, because the application server on top could be just one single instance for us also, and moving to the cloud and a private cloud, all the data that are linked to multi-countries clients, but that are not containing, let's say, sensitive data inside. For example, we can put all the portfolio information, transactions information of all the clients across the country in one single system in the private cloud. In the meanwhile, we get the sensitive data of the client inside the country, inside the on-premise of each single country. In this kind of configuration, for example, you reduce a lot the costs of the infrastructure, because you are one single system that contains all the data together across the country, and you are demanding of smaller system inside the country just for getting let's say the sensitive data. And at the same time, in this way, you are able to use to cross the data coming from multiple countries, exactly for what we are saying before, for the business intelligence or artificial intelligence algorithms that can leverage on a huge amount of data coming from multiple countries to, let's say, to retrieve or discover value from those data and use those value for increase the efficiency of the system. Okay.
You mentioned perhaps that this is sort of the tier one level bank. Is that where this kind of infrastructure and capability sits right now? Because it sounds complex. It sounds like it requires significant skill sets within the institution to deliver and maintain. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I would say that whatever we discussed so far enable this approach. So I would say that if you have one monolithic application, you cannot do it. If you have also a service-oriented architecture, could be a step, need a step, but you are not, with a service-oriented architecture, you are not able to achieve this goal. We are starting discussing with some clients about that, because they are starting to think about it. They are starting to think about microservices. They are starting to think about cloud. In this case, is a hybrid cloud that is a little bit different. They are starting to think about containerless application. So without application server, but just small, let's say, functions that can be deployed or can be virtualized in virtual containers in a Docker, for example, image. And just if you are prepared with microservice approach, with the modularity, at that point, we can support a feature like that.
Yeah. And
you are right. Right now, probably, also this discussion was not in place right now. But at least this is the right moment on discussing on it.
Yeah,
I think that right now this is the change that are forced also banks and financial institutions think about that.
Yeah. So Ian, when you hear the idea of microservices and this modular approach and hybrid cloud, where systems and functions are different depending on needs and countries and all sorts of different things, where do you feel the industry is in terms of its readiness for this kind of structure?
Well, I think it's becoming. I think the industry has always been conservative, and particularly around technology. However, I think the speed has become much more important as a factor moving forward, and that's not just COVID. I think also sentiment is changing quite quickly. So we've got COVID, we've got rapid shifts in sentiment, and we've got the rise of intergenerational transfer, because the wealth is being spread more widely than ever before. It's new money, and the next generation requires, they will almost, the next generation, if you will, was born in the cloud. These are the guys, who are always on their devices. So I think the industry is now realizing this and is taking steps to move. And we have a few standout firms in wealth management that have already moved in the direction that Matteo is talking about. So I think you will see more, definitely, because the opportunity is far greater than the cost of not taking any action whatsoever. I mean, let me just give you an example of what's in store. With artificial intelligence and data predictive analysis, wealth managers will be able to deliver more proactive and personalized recommendations to the clients than they've ever been able to do before. The wealth management industry will move to a model that's similar to Amazon. You know, if you like this product or this investment, you might like this, or investors like you are interested in this type of portfolio, and you know, how about you? Now, this is going to be a massive evolution in the role and the capability of the advisors, because they're going to work much more in an environment where they're digitally connected with clients. And the advisors, their productivity will be a major opportunity for most wealth managers. What's not widely known is in many wealth managers, it's typical for advisors to spend 1.5 days on dealing manually with compliance, working off many different sources of data. And that 1.5 day takes them away from client-facing time. If we could recapture an element of that 1.5 day, which we would be able to do with these new technologies at the front, we will be able to improve the business performance quite significantly. And not only that, in terms of client service would increase, but also the productivity of the advisors. You know, it's not unrealistic to expect that with my existing advisor force, I could handle more clients.
Yep.
So currently my advisor might be dealing with 200 clients. With the new technologies, it could be that my ratio of clients to advisor goes from 200 to the advisor, 200 to one advisor to 300. Think of that as an enormous productivity gain. So for the first time, the new technologies at the front, including AI, but not restricted to it, and machine learning, they will enable us to scale advice for the first time and make it profitable.
Interesting. I think on the back end side, we could go on for a long time. So let's touch now on this front end stuff. So on personalization, the amenization, or whatever that word should be, of the wealth industry. So putting what the client wants in front of them at the point at which they're ready. Matteo, what can you tell us about the infrastructure that is, or the toolkit that is required to start delivering that? And can we start small and build something big? I mean, what is required?
Yeah. Yes. If I can, just one word on top of what Jan is just said, because I can fully agree the fact that with the new technology, the real game is having much more client with the same effort, probably, because you can do it. Right now, you have the history said that the relationship manager has a relationship one-to-one, typically physically one-to-one. But in the last 6 months, for example, the game is changed. So there's a lot of information, not structured information, but unstructured information that are passing through the digital channel of the bank, that are very, very useful. And then if we are able to grab that information and use that information for enforce and enrich the data sets that is used by artificial intelligence, for example, in this case, we increase dramatically the efficiency and let's say the suggestion and I call it augmented advice, okay? Because we can enrich the information in the system, and accordingly we can use this information for suggesting to DRM the next best actions.
Yep.
And this is the right time for doing it. And whenever we are moving this relationship between RM and client in a digital channel, at that point, we have a lot of information that we didn't have so far till yesterday. Okay.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree. And the same thing is with this information will be easier for the system to tailor advice for specific assets or sets of client or type of clients. And in this way, again, also the professionality and let's say, and the way that you interact with the client will be very appreciated by the client itself, because I'm tailoring an advice for you. But in the reality, I'm able doing it because the system is helping me reusing the data that I have in the system itself and suggest me what is the best investment, which is the best approach with my client. So Absolutely agree that this is the right time for this feature. And what about the infrastructure? Yes, again, mostly for the front end, I would say that you can, let's say, try to reach this path or follow this path incrementally. It's not let's say, a big bang choice. For example, as a Finantics, we deliver a lot of modules, and in our history, there are clients that start with a couple of modules, very small modules. They install those modules close to the rest of the application already existing there, and then step by step they start to increase and let's say expand this modularity in other area step by step. So it's not just a matter of changing completely the let's say the strategy of the architecture of the existing stuff. So I would say that absolutely this is something that can be, let's say, managed without big impacts on the full package of the project.
This may be a silly question, but I'm kind of used to the terminology in the market: core banking, CRM, portfolio management system, etc. I mean, is that still relevant, or are we talking about a completely different set of tools and terminologies? So, are we talking about portfolio management systems that integrate AI and data analytics, or are we talking about something completely different that I may be not aware of?
Well, it's a combination. I mean, I think we will always have the stack. So you'll have the client segments, but what will happen is that your client segments will go to personalization of one enabled through technology over time. Your channels will multiply, and the front office will be a lot around intelligent insights provided to advisors to enable a richer discussion with clients. So the front office, it remains, there'll be multiple segments, there'll be multiple channels, and there'll be multiple front office models. So what you're seeing is fragmentation of those traditional terms. I mean, we in the past, we might have talked about front office, and we knew roughly what a front office looked like. Going forward, there will be different combinations of front office, and these will be based on the segments. So the first thing you need to think about is the approach to this needs to be carefully thought out. So you start with the business because the segments are changing. So you have to look at the business case for the segments. There's a whole massive opportunity in individuals who can't currently access advice because it's too expensive. So at the lower end, you have opportunities now from the technology to make those client segments profitable. Equally well, you've got the high net worth and the upper high net worth with different demands. The second thing is you have to get your data strategy aligned to the client focus segments that you choose to serve. Because if you don't do that, then your service model will not sort of be enabled or work, or your technology and the data won't be leveraged in the best way. The third thing, and this is very important, is you also have to think about there's a double-edged sword to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data, because we do have to pay much more attention to things like client privacy, data security, because fraud remains an issue with these new models, just as they do with the old models, and also we have the cybersecurity. So you need to have the advanced security around the data sets. Now you then combine all of those three things and use those to create a modular business and technology architecture, just as Matteo was saying. So it's this ability to combine the business with the data, with the security, and then ultimately put that into a modular business architecture, which will be a combination of what we know in the stack, plus also these APIs, the microservices, the cloud that Matteo has been explaining. So it's a journey and it's modular. And as Matteo rightly says, is you wouldn't want to do everything at once. So it's good to have a modular approach. You can experiment, you can test, you can learn, because also dealing with new client segments requires you have to understand how those client segments want to interact with their wealth manager going forward. And that may be very different than in the past. And also, as Matteo said, there are new ways of interacting with advisors at the moment in this remote environment that we're in.
Interesting. And so, Matteo, is this in this modular world with different client segments, different needs, different approaches, but maybe one business behind it? Are we talking about one technology stack? I mean, does it look the same for every type of segment that the firm is serving, or is it built specifically for each one?
Yeah, no, I would say that in terms of technology point of view, architecture point of view, maybe it's better to talk architecture first and then technology. In terms of architecture point of view, I would say that is the same. The architecture is the same, is spread across all the segments that Yanis was mentioned. Or better, we should have an architecture that is in somehow configurable or flexible enough to permit, as Jan was saying, that to configure your system in a compliant with your business view. Whenever you are able to configure the system according to your business view, at that point, you can leverage on modules, different modules that combine together supports your view in terms of processes, business processes, user experience flows, multi-channels capability. All those elements are on top of the services that have to be compliant with your business view. And so if you decide that you have 3 or 4 different segments, what you need from an infrastructure is that allows you to configure the system in this way. And on top of that, you can implement maybe a dedicated user experience for each segment, but on top of the same logic, on top of the same infrastructure, on top of the same architecture. Just in this way, you can leverage on a lot of data that are at that point coherent across the different segments that, again, are used as well for incrementing or performing much better algorithms, artificial intelligence algorithms that can bring value from those data and let's say move this value again and train the system leveraging on exactly on those data.
Interesting. And who are the providers that are going to deliver this to the industry? I think historically the industry liked to build in-house. I think gradually moved towards more third-party providers, and there are some names that have been mentioned. But Ian mentioned, looking worldwide for new technologies in the cloud space. We're talking about Amazon and Microsoft and so on and so forth. Is the industry looking at an entirely new set of providers, or is it mainly the old providers with more modern approach? How does it look? And obviously then I think, Matteo, you mentioned a lot of the fintechs that are coming in with sort of a micro focus on one thing or another. So who's building and delivering this technology?
Yeah. Okay. The players that you mentioned, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are, let's say, are present, and they're moving more and more from an AIIS infrastructure as a service to software as a service. So they are providing a lot of services already in place that you can leverage on. But what I would like to mention here in this discussion is that if you have a strategy in which somehow you are able to be decoupled from the single vendor, also the infrastructure vendor, this is a very plus for you. Is a very good thing for the next for the maintenance cost on the next years, because this is another good point. In the past, I had discussion with some prospects that said, okay, I would like to move on the cloud, fine, and I would like to use Amazon. And so they start to implement their cloud infrastructure using specific Amazon services. That is better than having one single monolithic application. But the problem is, if tomorrow you find another, let's say, provider that make the same services, reducing with a low cost, let's say, for example, at that point you are in trouble because your application is implemented to be compliant with that specific provider. And this is the reason why containerization, virtualization, Docker, and hybrid cloud is getting out, and cloud native movement is coming out. Just because in this way you are, let's say, abstracting your infrastructure for any data provider or service provider. And for fintech, I would say that the fintech is quite different, because fintech is coming out with a lot of very vertical services. They do a very specific thing. They do it better than anyone else. And again, if you are able to inject this in your system in an easy way, again, with a modularity approach, with a microservice approach and whatever, it's perfect with you, because at that point you can leverage on the, and you can improve you can maintain your system and make your system on the last trend, technological trends, in very easy way, because it's easy for substituting.
So,
I mean, I
so
think
this is
also, I think
sorry.
also it's probably worth pointing out, that there are a number of providers. So, in answer to your question, there are traditional providers in the wealth management software industry that are adapting to these. Obviously, Finantix is one. We're moving towards best of breed providers. So what you're seeing is a move away from monolithic systems towards these more modular providers, just as Matteo was saying that Finantix do. And you're probably also seeing a move away from in-house because it's much easier now to work with preferred partners. So, I think a trend is away from the in-house on-prem towards working with best of breed providers. The key is you can interface now more combinations of systems. Now that provides another challenge, which is you have to choose the right mix of systems that go across the front,
Correct.
the middle, and the back.
Correct.
Which brings me to the point of, I suppose, I think we wanted to touch on this, which is the people and the skill set, the knowledge base. So, maybe the industry, certainly on the relationship manager side and the client side, they're of a certain age typically, and much of this is new to many people in the industry. So, does the industry have the skill set, the knowledge base, the culture to shift in this world? And if not, what will it take to take them there? What steps do they have to take to move in the direction that they can comfortably understand containerization and modularity and microservice architecture and all of these things? And I think the final point, it's not just a tech issue, is it? But this is integrated with business. So is the industry ready from a people and culture perspective?
Well, I think the industry is moving. So there's been quite a lot of effort by wealth managers to reskill advisors. There's a lot more training. You actually see now more wealth managers having in-house wealth management academies. Sometimes we guest speak on those. So I think there's a big element around re-education. And I think the re-education is around a changing client needs. I think it's around product specialization because we haven't talked about it, but the products are becoming much more complex. And then the last area is as I mentioned before, compliance and risk is always with us. So, there's a great deal of education. And also in today's environment, there's been some pretty quick training to enable advisors to better deal with clients on a remote basis, just as we are talking now. I mean, I think it's all new for us. So I think one of the things that came out of the survey is empowering talent and change is a big area going forward. I think the other area is this responsible leadership, and responsible leadership is being much more attuned to new technologies for the leadership team. I think there's a recognition that many leadership teams need to get more educated around the impact on the business of new technologies. I think also there are, as I mentioned before, social environmental megatrends that they're having to adapt to, more environmentally conscious and so on and so forth. So I think people, both from the point of view of the RMs, the product specialist in terms of talent overall, but also the leadership teams themselves are evolving. So I think I would say we're starting to see progress in that direction as well.
Matteo, what's your view as someone who would interact with these institutions? And obviously, as a head of innovation at a technology firm, you're probably at the forefront of understanding what the trends are, but maybe your buying group isn't. So what do you feel?
Yeah, I think that let's say in terms of, if you talk about the skills that is needed to follow this path, I mean, to follow the microservices, cloud, whatever, for sure are new skills. But in terms of, let's say, more generic point of view, the skills of the guys that are working on that doesn't change so much. I mean, it's just a matter of being and acquire new knowledge. No, as if you are a good developer, if you are a good team lead, you have to do it. Okay, so you have to acquire new knowledge. You have to follow the trends and try to understand the trends and apply them on your system. In this area, I would say that new skills is coming out very strongly is the data science, mainly linked to the AI. And this is mostly one new skills that is coming out in the last 3 or 4 years ago. And yes, this is something new, that this data science was not so, let's say, common in a company like us, for example, until 4 years ago. right now is a very important skill on having on our side. On the business point of view, I would say that there are two factors that let's say, forced to change a little bit the skills of the advisors. For example, one is the fact that in moving ahead with this, let's say, digitalization around the client, fully around the client, not just for assets, but also for communication, for proposals, for meetings management, for fully 360 degrees around the client. It means that the bank can control much better whatever is happening in the system. So it means that the relationship between the advisor and the bank is changing, okay, or the supervisor is changing. The advisors so far are quite free on doing it as they want. Their consultancies is again like that, because a face to face is quite difficult, so to change the mind of the advisors. But at the meantime, the bank knows what's happening, and so at that point, this is one let's say factor of changing this relationship. And the second factor is that the client is changing. Okay, client is more digital client right now. They are changing a lot the way they interact with the advisor. So the advisor have to change. Cannot be stay on the thinking that his client is what was the client 10 years ago. Now guys are using chats, are using video call, are using application for communicating. They would like to be smart, quick, fast, and the product is change as well in this direction, because now with the new technology you can change the structure of the cloud much often than in the past in a very efficient way. So all the changes that is happening right now are forcing to change also the skills of the advisor.
Yeah. Ian, when you're talking to firms and they're modernizing, they might be on the cloud, they might be on the hybrid cloud, they might have some modularity to their technical infrastructure. What are the quick wins that maybe you suggest they should make in terms of better dealing with clients, or perhaps further improving cost income ratios? Are there kind of like 1, 2, 3 of options that you generally see and that might recommend to firms?
Well, I think each firm is slightly different, and what we learned from the survey is that the senior execs are focused on 3 topics essentially. The first is growth, is revenue growth. The second is return, so that's the margin issue around the cost and the revenue, and then the last one is very important, which is the risk. And the risk is somewhat extending, as I mentioned before, because there's new dimensions of risk, which is also things like data risk and reputational risk, given the rapid shift in social trends. So I think the first issue is for the wealth manager to determine whether they've got a revenue issue, whether it's a cost issue, or whether it's a regulatory or a risk issue. And then I think it's what Matteo was saying, you can start small. I mean, most of the stuff that we're doing with clients right now doesn't have to be big. It can be taking a specific area, specific pain point, and then you can look to generate savings from that. You can improve efficiency from that usually, or you can help with revenue generation. But if you improve efficiency, what you can then do is take the money that you save from your first initiative and then plow it back into a second initiative, and you can keep funding as you go. So the idea of funding as you go is I can make progressive changes and link the funding as you go with the modularization that Matteo was mentioning, and you start to see that moving forward is not so much as a challenge as it was in the past. I mean, I think gone are the days of big, huge systems implementations. I think gone are the days of huge change programs. I think what we're seeing is much more focus, much more modularity, much more prove it, proof of concept, get a result and reinvest. And I think that's the way we'll see many of the wealth managers will be able to make this transition. And they'll do it with partners. So the partners will be both business consultants and also software providers like Finantics. And they'll be working quite closely together so that for the first time, or I don't know if it's for the first time, but we will be able to bridge that business and technology divide, which in some ways it has impeded the progress of the industry and wealth management moving forward.
Yeah, great, Ian. So, Matteo, thinking of Ian's point, there was save as you go. So firms, let's say, have saved money on outsourcing to the cloud. So they have a lower cost base, but they want to win clients, they want to grow assets. What are you seeing from the clients that you work with and the prospects that you work with in terms of where they can best do that and how they can best do that? Maybe thinking about the fact small steps rather than big bang. Are there certain clear opportunities for the market?
Yes, another point that I would add as a let's say as a good suggestion from a point of view, having maintaining the costs controlled in the next year is also being compliant with standards. Whenever you are using, for example, cloud native is a new standard is coming out. Microservices is another standards. If you move on, new technology like GraphDBs, for example, there's many different GraphDB compliant, but some are compliant with standards, and others are not compliant with standards or a proprietary implementation.
Yep.
Based on standards means be able tomorrow to switch to other software provider without big impact. Okay, reducing the impact of your system. So yes, this is another point that I would like to add on this. And yes, the fact that the modularity allows you to have a path for this changing. So the modularity offer, again, in the beginning I said it, modularity means freedom for you. Freedom means freedom also in terms of your path, of your roadmap. You can plan to change, not in one day, but maybe in 2 or 3 years, in gradularity with the other components. Yes.
Okay. Well, we're approaching the hour, so I think we should have some wrap up points. I mean, I think I've learned that this is a hugely complex topic, right? We could go into much more detail in perhaps all of these areas, and certainly there's more than enough content to fill an hour. So, Ian, would you make some final recommendations of where the wealth management industry is and what it needs to do next, maybe summarizing some of the points you've referenced and considering its technology stack in that?
Yes, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is, I'd reiterate, wealth management is a great place to be. Wealth management industry is one of the most attractive in financial services from the point of view of growth and also returns. It can be very profitable. That needs careful management. I think on the business side, you're going to be moving on 4 fronts. I think it's going to be around differentiated client segmentation and experience, as I mentioned before. It'll be about leveraging intelligent operations and technology using AI and machine learning. And then I think it will also be about responsible leadership and strategy. As I mentioned before, I think it's wealth with responsibility going forward, because we need to recognize we're in difficult times at the moment, and different members of society have been affected by in different ways, and the sentiment will change. So responsible leadership and strategy, and then lastly, empowered talent and change. I think the stack, as I mentioned before, I think you need to think about the stack in a new way. It's the front office is where a lot of the action will move to. The middle and back office will become more lean, standardized, automated, but will also be data intelligent. I think it's most important to have your data strategy in place, because that's going to be key moving forward. Most wealth managers have data fragmented all over the place. So they need to have that data strategy and that combining that data, because without that, you can't effectively then implement the AI or artificial intelligence or machine learning. The last thing, I would reiterate Matteo's point. I think we're moving to more modular cloud-based models. There's going to be greater use of APIs and microservices, and the way in which we have delivered technology in the past will be much less in-house and more with partnerships, both with business consultants and to help, but also with software providers. And we aim to work at that intersection of the new models. So that's probably the best way I can describe it.
Well, good news for you, Matteo. But a final word to you in summary. We have about a minute before I think we need to wrap up. So what would be your concluding summary points from the discussion?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting discussion. I would say that the link between business and technology right now is reducing a lot. There's a lot of change that is happening right now around the world, and mainly also in the wealth management world. And I think that is a great opportunity for company like us. And also I agree the fact that the real change in the next year will be playing on the front end part, because the backend will evolve, probably will be compliant with standards, will be move on standards, but again, it doesn't make the difference in terms of efficiency and let's say and performance in terms of say sell new product for to new type of clients. This game will be played on the front end, because you have to aggregate backend data with many other data that is right now is moving from paper to digital world. And whenever you have and when you are digitalizing those data, at that point you can leverage on the data to be more efficient, more as I said, more tailored on your clients, and hopefully improve the number of clients that you can manage in a very high professionality with the same effort. This is the goal for wealth management.
Great. Well, both gentlemen, thank you very much for that. Very insightful, complex, and definitely a lot of other elements to get into. Shame we just had an hour, but thank you for your time. For the audience, this will now be recorded and available to listen to for infinity on our website and on Bright Talk, and perhaps on some other places. So thank you for listening in. But gentlemen, thank you again. Much appreciated, and look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Thank you
My
for
pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.